Hey all, this is Ed,
This is Kara.
and this is your day's dumpster fire. Where's our posy intro?
I don't know. That's a good trash can fire.
Let's.
There it goes.
Ah, there we go.
Perfect.
Wow, I feel like we should leave that in.
Yeah. Why would we not? I would.
Like we have this perfectly curated, figured out,
We've done
intro
it.
music.
Yeah, this is the 11th official time that we've done it.
Well, actually, this is the
Well?
10th because the 10th time was some random weird spy music,
Oh, that's right.
and we just kind of rolled with it. Literally,
yeah.
I just edited for weird things, and I just didn't care, and I just rolled with it.
So
And
we're figuring ourselves out.
yeah, and then I bring back our little posy intro, and it still doesn't work. So
We got it eventually. I mean, really, we could just edit it and nobody would know the difference, but I think it's funnier to leave it in.
I agree. I think we should leave it in. So yeah, welcome to our part 2 of our Custer's Last Stand episode. In the first episode, we looked at Custer as a human being. We if you haven't listened to episode 10, you might want to listen to this one because we dove into Custer's career and basically concluded that yes, this guy was really over the top in the Civil War. He probably didn't make the best decisions that would favor the federal government as well as the future president of Ulysses S. Grant. He kind of did things his own way, but he was also fiercely loyal to his men, incredibly loyal to his wife, which was something that you didn't see a whole lot of. I mean, even in the times of chivalry and all that kind of stuff, we still hear so many cases of men just in a position of power cheating on their wives and stuff like that, and we're supposed to just wash all that away. Yeah, Custer didn't do that. Custer wasn't into that.
He loved his wifey.
Yeah, no, he's he's kind of what we would hope that all husbands would be, even if he was a little weird and maybe at times delusional in terms of his existence in the bigger picture of the conflict that was ahead of him.
That's fair.
So yeah, the first episode was looking at Custer himself, and I wanted to kind of set that up in a way so that it wouldn't, when we get to the third episode or the third edition here, and we really look at this battle of greasy grass as the Native Americans know it, or the Custer's Last Stand as how we hear it in textbooks. The idea is to show that, yeah, this guy was a little eccentric, but he was also a human being, and he wasn't as weird and delusional as he's portrayed in like films from the 1970s and whatnot. And so what I wanted to do on this episode is look at what was the Native American force, what was the opposing force, and some of the politics that went into it. What was the Native American force that ultimately destroyed a highly regarded, for the most part, fairly well trained and equipped 7th Cavalry in less than 2 to 3 hours? And so that's kind of what we're going to be getting into today. We're going to be talking a lot about some leaders on the Native American side that were considered almost mentally deficient, but turned out that they were absolutely brilliant in the long run. And we're going to kind of tell their story and how that tied into the events leading up to Custer's Last Stand. But most importantly-ish is you were telling me that you had a trash can. So we were talking about this before. You had a trash can fire that could ultimately alter the flow of our little show. And so what do you got, Kara? I'm really curious to see where this goes.
Yes. So, you know how I was originally going to do botched paint restorations? I'm still going to do that, by the way. I have not forgotten about it. However, I came across a big Gigundo dumpster fire when my husband and I were watching a World War II documentary.
Oh.
And I decided I'm going to cover this large Gigundo dumpster fire in a full episode, as opposed to the paint restoration episode. So, sorry everybody. My trash can fire is that I found a topic that I am more interested in at the moment, but I will get back to you on the other one. And I can tell you now, or I can tell you later as to what that is.
What's the basic premise? I mean, what's the... You don't have to go on all the details, but like, what was this, a battle or?
No, it's a political election in Germany in the early 1930s.
Is this the election on how Hitler got elected?
Hitler wasn't technically elected. He was assigned.
Okay.
But we can get into it, and I find it fascinating, and it's something that I just learned, and I was like, that is an amazing dumpster fire idea. It fits right in.
I kind of want to, like, maybe after this, send me the link of the documentary. I may have an idea what it's about, because when you look at German elections in the 1930s, even in the late 1920s, you know, Germany was in such a bad state of affairs that, you know, any extremist could get elected, even if it was under super shady and extreme means.
I'm texting you I'm texting it to you right now. Sorry, everybody else. You all need to wait, but
yeah, that's how we keep listenership.
You're welcome. I will tell you at the end of this episode. How's that? Just stick around for this episode, and then you will find out at the end.
Yeah, I'm curious because your message still hasn't come over yet. But I'm all ears, man. This is I think I have an idea what it is. I may be off a little bit, but yeah, once I get your text message, I will be able to confirm or deny, but definitely not confirm anything. But I have a funny feeling it does kind of tie into the election shenanigans that we're kind of dealing with today a little bit, in terms of people in desperation will just get anybody in office. Maybe
it was more like, I have to contain this annoying gnat somehow, and it just went all wrong. It didn't work. It didn't work.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I guess with that little cliffhanger, we'll have to
stick around. You'll find out at the end of this episode.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Find out what Kara's got up her sleeve for her trash can fire that turns into a dumpster fire that, given that it kind of preceded World War II, turned into a landfill fire.
Yes, give us that World War II shenanigans, baby. Let's go. It's actually really horrible and awful, but also very interesting. Anyways, let's get back to General Custer.
So yeah, let me click on over, because I was like seriously Googling everything that I could off of what you were saying, and like, hey, ChatGPT, what is she talking about? Mm-hmm. And I
texted it to you.
I know, but on what? On my cell phone?
Yeah.
Oh, you did just... Okay, I just got it.
All right, cool.
Okay. Involving that guy with a lion.
Uh-huh.
The dude with the donkey that...
Don't forget the Zeppelin. The Zeppelin that caught fire.
Which also ultimately gave Hitler a raging chicken full of power. Okay, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Chickenpox.
I was thinking more like smallpox, but yeah, I mean, that works too.
I could go on with that joke, but for the sake of our listeners, I'm not going to. I'll leave that for later.
No, yeah, I'm reading your text in full here, and yes, that is going to be epic.
It's going to be great. I'm
because
excited.
That's a very untold story.
Yeah, I learned that this weekend watching TV with my husband. I was like, oh, let me read into that more.
Because, well, this is like 2 dumpster fires in a row.
Mm-hmm.
One's
It's
a
actually,
hydrogen bomb, and the other one is, well, Hitler.
Jesus. You're welcome for
So,
that. I'll
all
tell
right,
you
yeah.
guys
On that note,
after.
let's
Anyway.
So yeah, let's get into the force that ultimately defeated Custer. So when we left off with Custer, he had a pretty storied career in the Civil War. I watched a bunch of documentaries on Custer's involvement in the Battle of Gettysburg. He literally held off Jeb Stuart, which was the largest cavalry force in the Confederate Army, and it dwarfed Custer's numbers in 1863. But yet Custer figured out a way to hold off Jeb Stuart as this unstoppable cavalry force. Like Custer really stood out as a pretty incredible tactician, and he even made his way up to the rank of general. It was a field commission, so I think he entered in as like a lieutenant or captain or whatever. And then just right off the bat, within 2 years, he's considered the rank of a general. The sucky part about a field commission is that once the war is over, you lose that rank and you go back to what you were prior. But that didn't stop him. There was a lot of people in the Civil War, a lot of generals that really saw Custer for his, tactical mindset and whatnot. And he shortly after the war, Custer tried to get into politics. He tried to climb the ranks again. It wasn't until Abraham Lincoln started saying, "Hey, we need to start taking over the plains. We obviously the Union Army won this war. Like if we could defeat the Confederate Army, which was pretty impressive, we should have no problems defeating these Native Americans out to the west." And so we kind of find ourselves in a little bit of a Custer cluster, if that makes sense.
I like it.
Yeah, Custer cluster.
That needs to be on a t-shirt.
Yes, yeah, but yeah, especially when we're looking at some really really key leaders like Sheridan and Sherman and all these people that really promoted or really want Custer a part of their team because they saw that he was an asset that could take on the Lakota and whatnot. So these were the conflicts that followed shortly. Actually, they kind of started right before the Civil War. They lulled out during the Civil War because, let's face it, we've got a gigantic army to the south that we need to defeat. We need to kind of like repair that. So, like, we lose focus on the 1840s and 1850s, where there was a lot of Native American slash federal government interaction and some really sketchy treaties and all sorts of really bad promises that were made. There was a lot of this stuff that was going on that kind of put on hold, and that I got put on hold because of the Civil War. This was a huge mistake on the federal government side of things because before, and I hate to say it this way, and it's kind of racist, but let me just take the perspective from the federal side of things, the federal government, which I don't agree with, but let me just kind of take their side for a minute. They had this grand plan of just wiping out the natives in like from Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, even in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. The idea was to just overwhelm them and push them out under the guise that, okay, look, we're going to create these reservations for you guys. We will clearly map out where you can live and prosper and everything. But then it seemed like a couple years later, hey, we found gold on your land, so we're going to need you to leave. And if you don't leave, you'll become hostiles of the federal government and we'll have to send an army out to remove you. Yeah, yeah, and I know you're kind of a big fan of Grant, and I'm a big fan of Grant as a general and stuff like that.
As a
But
general, he wasn't the best president, though.
no, generals don't make the best president. I think the best one we've ever had was probably Washington, and that's because he legit didn't want the job.
Yeah.
But we're going to discover that Ulysses S. Grant came to a point in his presidential term where he's like, I honestly could care less about whatever agreement we had. I could care less about any treaties we've made or anything. This is our land, and they can either move or we can kill them. And so the one tribe, or the one, I would say, nation at this point, the one nation that was in the middle of all this, because you had the, the American states to the east, but then to the west you had the Crow, and the Crow usually sided with the United States because of the group of people that lived in the middle. So we're talking the Crow was like in the Wyoming, Idaho area and whatnot, whereas the Lakota Sioux was being pushed into all of these like the Black Hills regions and stuff like that. So kind of think like in your head Yellowstone Park, Yellowstone River, everybody kind of got squeezed into this one area that resulted in the Lakota Sioux really having to branch out and change their ways. And so let's take a look at this. So, let's see here. I think I already read all that stuff. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, Custer. Yeah, Grant was elated. Yeah, okay. Custer was considered America's Caesar. All right, cool. What was going on with the Native Americans at this time? So, perhaps the most prominent Native American tribe in this time was the Lakota, or when we start getting into like the Cheyenne area of Wyoming. So we're talking, what is that, like very southeast Wyoming and all that. So we are branching into the areas. Think of Denver, but north. So that they were called the Teton Sioux. I listened to a podcast by a couple of Australians that had no idea how to pronounce Teton Sioux. They called them the Teton Sucks.
Nice.
And I'm like, cool.
That's not it.
That's not it at all. But I kind of chuckled because that's kind of how a lot of uneducated Americans that I've come across in my profession would have called it.
That's fair.
So the Teton Sioux, the Lakota, guys, or ladies and gentlemen, take a minute and just Wikipedia the Lakota. The Lakota was probably one of the most adaptable, one of the most flexible, one of the most aggressive tribes in Native American history. So if you were to look at the movie 300, right, and it's supposed to be 300 Spartans against this impossible force and whatnot, try to think of the Lakota as like the Spartans. These guys were not messing around. So dating back to the 9th century, the Lakota traveled up the northern Mississippi River to Minnesota. In the 1730s, the Cheyenne people introduced horses to the Lakota, and from there they changed from an agrarian society to a martial society, which was interesting because a lot of martial societies transferred over to agrarian. What am I talking about there? Well, a martial society is where you follow where the meat goes, right? So you're tracking the buffalo. You have your seasons cut out, where the idea is that you hunt and bring back enough stuff for people to grow, or to feed off of. Whereas the agrarian society is like, we're going to stay put. We know how to farm this land. We know how to till it. We know how to harvest it. we can make our living off of this area staying put rather than just go gallivanting off into the plains and hoping that we bring back something tasty.
Mm-hmm.
The Lakota were kind of different in that regard, where a lot of tribes wanted to leave the martial side of things and become agrarian. The Lakota preferred to ditch farming and just go hunting. And so yeah, that's kind of what they did. They really became skilled horsemen. They were highly trained in bow and arrow, rifle shooting. Most of them used muskets, but you know what? A gun is a gun is a gun. They learned how to throw hatchets. They learned how to throw spears. They were learning all the forms of combat, which got ingrained into their culture, which we will see later on. From the Lakota getting pushed into the Dakotas and the Wyoming and becoming a martial society, from there the Lakota lived a warrior slash Bushido code of life. I think the whole Bushido code thing is something that we could probably visit in another episode.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that your value, your contribution to society or to your leadership or to your family is more tied to what you are willing and what you have given up of yourself. So it's not so much like today we look at these billionaires and how they have these extravagant lives and all that, like, dang, these billionaires are somebody to look up to. When we look at like the Wario the Wario sorry, Mario Kart a couple hours before, the warrior slash Bushido code could also be kind of tied to the Roman philosophy, is that how you live your life is nowhere nearly important is how you give up your life. And so you conduct yourself in a way that you will give the most amount of effort or the resources, you give the most of everything possible to your tribe as much as your life is worth. So when you have that mindset, it's suddenly you're dealing with a very different warrior. Right. You can look at the conflict in the Ukraine right now. You don't have a lot of Russian soldiers that are willing to just give their all for this conflict. Most of them don't care. Most of them don't want to be there. Most of them are trying to figure out how to surrender so they can survive all this. But you also look at the Ukrainian side, which is very patriotic, and they are willing to, hey, if it means my life to save 100 more, then let's go for it. And so as a result, you create a very, very unique type of warrior, right? So I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. But in other words, these guys were serious fighters. And they trained it so that their greatest resources was second only to horses. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that if you're a young Lakota warrior, first things first, if you were born weak or deficient, you were just killed. That's all there was to it.
Okay.
And we're going to come across a very, very famous leader who barely was able to prove himself in his early years to keep himself alive. So yeah, these guys were trained heavily in all forms of combat, all sorts of tactics and whatnot. But everything was kind of second to horses, and the Lakota viewed horsemanship as the pinnacle. Like this was the Rangers, the Delta Force. Being able to secure horses and whatnot was absolutely paramount. Horses were introduced to the Lakota in the 1730s, so we're talking maybe 120 years that the Lakota had been experimenting with horses and breeds and all that. And the entire Lakota culture changed to revolve around the martial living idea. Instead of just gathering and farming, they would focus on hunting and migration. of the buffalo across the Dakotas and into Wyoming and Montana. This caused the Lakota to spread over a large swath of land and come in contact with a variety of strong and disagreeable tribes along the way. Probably the biggest one that they did kind of butt up against too was the Crow. And so yeah, they kind of had a period of absolute incredible growth. And yeah, they also had to deal with like European and Americans that kind of moved into their territories. They brought with a whole bunch of disease. This disease, whether it was smallpox or plague or whatever, it kind of decimated their numbers to a point. But again, the ones that survived were the strongest. So we're kind of planting the seeds here for a group of people that were battle hardened, very independent. You know, these people meant business, and if you saw them on the horizon, watch out. During the Lewis and Clark expedition from 1804 to 1806, the expedition and the Lakota were at a stalemate. So we're talking about, I think it was like 20, 30 folks on the Lewis and Clark expedition. They kind of squared off against each other. Lewis and Clark had a little bit better firepower, but yeah, it came to a stalemate, but thankfully it didn't come to fruition, and they kind of parted ways. Now, when we jump to 1851, the U.S. built Fort Laramie, and we'll kind of touch back on this a little bit. The Fort Laramie was on Lakota territory, and of course they built it there because, you know, white people. But it was at Fort Laramie that a gigantic treaty was signed between the U.S. and Native Americans. The idea was to end hostilities between the two, but in reality, it totally favored the American government. To kind of give you an idea here, so for example, in 1860s, when gold was discovered in the Black Hills or the South Dakota-Wyoming border, this is where Deadwood was constructed as a town. You may have seen a show on HBO about it. Yeah, this Deadwood town, again, all sorts of stories that come out of that.
Cowboys.
But the 7th Cavalry was sent out, and so this was kind of at the tail end of the Civil War. But the 7th Cavalry, which we will hear of again, was sent out to confirm that there was gold and to remove, and I do this in air quotes, remove American prospectors to prevent them from being killed by a bunch of really pissed off Native Americans, i.e. the Lakota. The 7th Cavalry confirmed that there was gold, but made absolutely no mention of the Lakota Sioux, who had full legal rights to the land. The president at that time, Ulysses S. Grant, so we're kind of dealing with like early 1870s, Ulysses S. Grant pretty much said screw it and ordered all the tribes to leave the land, and if they didn't, then they would be considered enemies of the nation. That's kind of how that Fort Laramie treaty read, is you can hang out here until we don't want you here, then we're going to kick you out.
Some nonsense. Absolute nonsense. That's the nice way to put it.
Yeah, it is. I hate to say it. It's kind of intelligent lawyering and policy writing.
Still nonsense.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's completely unjust. This is something that has been going on since the early 1600s. Shoot, even 1500s, all the way up to like the 1960s.
Yeah, I know. But still doesn't make it any better. I will also say it only gets worse after that with another president that I will not mention at this time. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's you're right. It is something that it only gets worse, and the reason why it gets worse is after Custer's last stand, the Plains Wars turned into a full-scale war. And we'll talk about that on the 3rd episode, because at this point, when Custer, spoiler alert, Custer dies,
What?
I'm sorry.
Man.
He doesn't make it out of this alive, but it turns into an all out war. It turns into something bordering on I hate to say it this way, but some top Nazi leaders mentioned this in the Nuremberg trials. It turned into a final solution. It turned into an absolute genocide of a whole culture of people. And this is something that the leaders of the Lakota had no idea what happened, but we haven't gotten there yet. We still need to kind of look at some of the people that rose to the ranks in the Lakota Sioux. And so in 1831, so we're kind of backtracking a few years here, but in 1831, there was a baby who was born. That's right. Babies were born in 1831.
Born did babies.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Babies with umbilical cords and the works. Like
the whole thing minus the pain medications that they stab into your back, so imagine the pain. You're welcome, ladies.
Actually, the Native Americans had some really good mushrooms.
There you go.
So when they would crank up the temperature of the teepee till it was like 120 degrees, they would dehydrate the mother, and then they would light all these mushrooms, so that giving birth to a baby was more of a spiritual experience rather than the idea of giving birth to a 8-pound, 11-ounce cannonball through a hole that shouldn't allow that to happen.
I can respect that.
Yeah.
But it still sounds painful and awful.
And men, yeah, you need to be sympathetic towards that, because there's going to be no degree of pain that you could ever experience that is on par with giving birth. And that's the reason why a lot of Native American men, you ever heard of like coming of age rituals? For like, even in South America, like they create that banana leaf glove that has all these bullet ants in it that you have to stick your hand in for like 10 minutes.
Oh yeah.
A lot of tribes have something like that for when boys are in their 13s and 14s and they want to be considered men. They have to go through some absolutely insane rituals, like wearing a glove full of bullet ants or getting burned, or having an iron spike dug into various body parts. Like, you name it. There's a lot of cultures out there that are like, hey boys, if you want to be considered yourself a man, you have to do something that is kind of on par to giving birth to a child.
Huh.
So yeah, I would say that a lot of cultures are kind of on par with that to an extent.
Yeah.
The Western side of things, or the American side of things, when my wife was in labor for like 2 days at a time, I had a nice, comfy, pillowed couch to lay on while I slept, while she suffered.
And should I go get a glove full of bullet ants? I'll give it to your lady.
No, I'm good. I've had the luxury of passing a kidney stone, and I'm going to count that.
All right.
So, and I've also had some really sketchy breakfast burritos in my time that I would probably say would at least get halfway to the pain of childbirth. But
yikes.
Yeah, that's another trash can fire. So,
oof, all right.
So yeah, the Lakota Sioux at this time, this new little bundle of Lakota Sioux happiness. He was actually born in the Hunkpapa Sioux tribe. He was born to a warrior named Returned Again, and his wife, her Holy Door. That's a kind of an interesting name to give to a woman, but hey, it's her Holy Door. We're going to go with it. I'm
wondering what the origin of that name is, because this person names their daughter that as well. So now I'm going to look it up. Looking it up. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
So yeah, Jumping Badger was like their only child. Jumping Badger, that was his name, was the apple of his parents' eye. The Lakota Sioux at this time were martial people, so at this time they were migrating from buffalo herd to buffalo herd for sustenance. Not only would they hunt and kill the buffalo for food, they would fiercely protect their herds and migrations So not only did they kind of see where these buffalo were going, but they would also kind of keep an eye on possible threats. And if there was anybody that was going to mess with their herd, yeah, then the Lakota were going to come out and take care of things. So yeah, they would kill anyone who got in the way of their lanes, so to speak. Composed of 6 different tribes. So the Lakota Sioux was 6 different tribes. One of them was the Hunkpapa. I think there is the Arapaho. There's a couple others that I really, really tried to get the pronunciation right, and it didn't work. And I couldn't get it to work. Therefore, it is not appropriate for me to slaughter a name. Hunkpapa, cool. Arapaho, cool. There was 4 more behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is because they were chased from their lands in the Great Lakes by the U.S. forces and were largely thought of as a fragmented culture. This would haunt Custer in the future. The 6 tribes that made up the Lakota Sioux were considered by the federal government as a broken group of people, and it shouldn't be hard to overwhelm them. So the same fragmentation also worked in the Lakota's advantage as they moved west. As they escaped the U.S. forces dating back to the 1700s, they moved west in small separate tribes, and when they were met with confrontation, they could easily call upon reinforcements. Like they would combine as necessary as like these sub-tribes and fight off whoever they need to, and then they'd be like, all right, cool. Are you good? Yeah, we're good. Are you good? Yep, we're good. And they would kind of spread apart. And this allowed them to conquer lands and spread out and take a sizable chunk of the North American plains. Over the years, the Lakota used this strategy to overtake many of the lands from Nebraska, West South Dakota, Southwest North Dakota, Southeast Montana, and Northeast Wyoming. That's a good chunk of the plains right there. It's like a gigantic circle involving thousands and thousands of square miles of land.
Mm-hmm.
This swath of land pretty much controlled the migration patterns of the buffalo at that time. This is also the same time that America was trying to build a railroad along what would today be considered the I-80. They were trying to build a freaking railroad that would go from east to west to fix a lot of this, the travel dangers. That too resulted in a lot of conflicts, and we haven't even got to the gold rush yet. So the one nation the Lakota severely pissed off was one of the largest nations was the Crow. The Crow weren't newcomers. They had control of these parts for generations, and the Lakota got involved. So the Lakota took a lot of the lands away from the Crow, and they held a grudge for quite some time.
Okay.
Even though Lakota consider the Crows mostly a cowardly tribe, the Crow, in fact, they were a credible threat. They did outnumber the Lakota. They had more experience in those lands. And so, yeah, like the Crow, it's always best to kind of talk down to your enemies, try to make yourself look better. But in reality, the Crow weren't messing around. Yeah, they pushed back a lot. So let's getting back to Jumping Badger here. He wasn't like the rest of the kids. He was an okay fighter, but when asked a question, he wouldn't answer very quickly, right? If you were trying to test him on trivia as very basic knowledge, he wouldn't answer super fast. He was slow. He was methodical. This guy was very strategic. And he never rushed into a fight, and much preferred to fully understand the entire situation. This was entirely counterintuitive to the Lakota fighting practice. Jumping Badger, or as he would later become known as quote-unquote slow, so that was his second name, is the guy that was considered slow. Wasn't it the ultra fierce Spartan style fighter the Lakota desired? Slow often held back and considered a capable, but not what the Lakota considered as a type tier elite fighter.
In other words, he would have made a very good general and leader.
Yeah. Kind of, sort of.
Kind of. He thought about things.
No, his approach was that before we go in guns a-blazing, let's figure out, let's try to figure out what would be the best solution to fight this upcoming fight and minimize our losses and maximize the opponent's efforts. And so, yeah, so Slow, as he was considered for quite some time, he wasn't like tossed away because he did fight. He did learn how to fight. He wasn't as aggressive as everybody, but he also didn't lose as much either. And so Slow kind of he had a bit of rough childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So how did Slow not get killed or kicked out of the tribe if he was if he wasn't such like necessarily a good fighter? Well, to be slow, doing air quotes over here, so to speak, methodical and calculated and whatnot meant that you would be good at hunting. So hunting is the exact opposite of warring. You need to be patient. You need to be able to strike when it is the most opportune time. To hunt effectively, it takes days, if not weeks, to bring back an animal. And Slow was perfect for the task. He could hang out for days on end watching a rabbit until it was the perfect time to attack. By his mid-teens and early 20s, Slow decided to divide the hunting party. So he kind of got in charge of some hunting parties because, let's face it, any dude who's going to just bring back food on a regular basis
Mm-hmm.
is kind of hot. Like, yeah, I know you brought back a whole bunch of scalps from a warring tribe, but we can't eat those. But you bring back 6 buffalo? Okay.
Yeah.
We can work with that.
Yeah. Can't eat the trophies.
Yeah. It's having a weird wrinkled up little scalp on your wall isn't as impressive as having like a giant stuffed buffalo head on your wall.
Oh, the image in my head was not okay. Oh man.
So yeah, to hunt effectively, it takes a lot. It really does take a lot of patience, and like I said before, it is the opposite of warring. By his mid-teens and early 20s, Slow decided to divide hunting parties into shifts. So the idea was this: instead of sending out, say, 75 hunters to just go out at once and bring back as much stuff as possible, he noticed that they weren't coming back with a consistent amount of food. So you could send out 75 hunters or maybe, say, 25 hunters, and they would bring back the same amount of food. So what would happen if you were to send out 3 shifts of 25 hunters? So the first shift goes out in week 1, right? So party A, week 1, party B, week 2, party C, week 3, and so on. The idea was that, yes, would each hunting party bring back a little less food? Yes. But the key point, though, was that it was always consistent. And when you are consistent, that means you can plan. You can organize. You can predict, like, okay, as a family, as a tribe, we're going to do these things because we know by these times we'll have the resources to work with.
Okay.
And so already we're kind of seeing how Slow is kind of working things out. Now, this is where things are going to get a little interesting. So the other aspect of how Slow proved himself so that he wouldn't be killed off or exiled for being, well, slow, was that he proved himself in the subtle art of stealing horses, which is strange because to this day, unless you've seen Gone in 60 Seconds, we don't really praise people's ability to steal a whole bunch of cars in one night.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you do on the weekends, but
not that.
I mean, hey, if you do,
I don't.
I'm totally cool with it.
I don't.
Just don't get caught because I need a co-host.
No, no. I do on the Xbox playing GTA video
Yeah,
games.
it's not Grand Theft Auto if you're actually playing Grand Theft Auto.
Correct.
And
Video
then
games.
you're okay.
Fake cars. Anyways, continue.
So yeah, like I mentioned before, horses were worth their weight in gold on the plains. Horses determined everything in a tribe. They could do everything from, growing food in terms of tilling and plowing and all that. But they were also like the main weapon used in conflict and whatnot. So your ability to have horses, your ability to ride them, your ability to attack with them meant that, well, I mean, jump forward a couple of years, Vietnam War, our cavalry was swapped out from horses and even tanks from World War II. Our cavalry was swapped out to helicopters because horses could dump a lot of soldiers, highly trained soldiers, in a very small area and get them out really, really fast. And so, like, horses back then were considered like the helicopters of today.
For those of you who want to stick with us for the long term, we could talk about World War One and the transfer from horses to more like the tanks and the planes. World War One, that is the transfer point, and that is also a dumpster fire that we can talk about.
Yeah, I kind of touched upon that with Winston Churchill.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
Like how he lost everything, and then he noticed that you could put guns on these water tanks, and it put some treads on them, and they were good to go.
mm-hmm.
And then even still, which is something that I kind of want to allude to because I want to bring this up in our final episode here. When we look at the Vietnam War, the first major, like, huge battle between the Americans and the Viet Cong, it was the Battle of Ia Drang, where, guess what? A battalion of the 7th Cavalry helicoptered into this valley, and these 435 men had to fight off thousands of highly trained and experienced Viet Cong over the course of like 2 to 3 days. And it's interesting how, like, the 7th Cavalry at that time was able to come out of that alive, but the 7th Cavalry at, Custer's Last Stand couldn't. And it really boiled down to the technology. And at this time, it was horses. And this is something that Slow was really good at stealing. So there was a case in Slow's history, early history, where one day the Lakota planned a huge hit on the Crow. The idea was to sneak in and cause a huge stampede of the horses. And the idea was to kind of trick these horses to stampede, but go in a very, very particular direction. So they would kind of like freak out and run over a hill and then be captured by the Lakota.
Okay.
That were waiting. So the only problem is that once the stampede was instigated, the cover was blown. It was not hard to see that, holy crap, here's all of our horses. They're freaking out. They're running in that direction. So whatever vector those horses are running in, if we were to trace a line the opposite way, we could find out whoever caused the stampede where they're staying at. If that makes sense.
Yeah, just look back at where they're freaking out.
Yeah. Look at where they were at. Look at where they're going, and trace the line back to where whoever caused it. And yeah, you've got your culprit. So Slow and a small contingent of other thieves snuck into the Crow encampment and set up the stampede as planned. The only problem is that once the stampede was instigated, the cover was blown. Naturally, of course, a chase sequence broke out where Slow and his followers were being chased over the open plain seas while being chased by a huge mass of seriously pissed off Crow, including their chief.
Okay.
So, yeah, Slow stored up a hornet's nest, like This is
we got an epic car chase happening on horses.
Yeah. So basically, or eventually, the Lakota met up with their fellow horse thieves, where they were heavily ensconced and protected, but like they were kind of surrounded by some overcropping hills and whatnot. The it resulted in a stalemate, right? The Crow were launching arrows and everything they had, and they had the Lakota surrounded, but also too the Lakota were kind of like heavily protected from all this, even though they were outnumbered. So it kind of turned into a stalemate, and so there was a problem here. How do we fix this, right? If the Crow backed down and said, well, crap, we're never going to be able to kill these guys, then what's the point, right? We're just saying, hey, take all our horses and it's fine. But then again, though, if the Lakota back down, then not only would they lose the horses, but they're all going to get killed because they tried to steal horses.
Okay.
All right. Here's where the story gets interesting. So Slow had an idea. It's like, hey, we can't retreat and we can't attack. I'm going to ride out and I'm going to talk to the Crow chief and see if we can maybe have a duke it up between him and me and we can figure it out. This is where Slow really stood out, and it's probably one of the most interesting fights in American history. So Slow hopped on a horse and he rode out to the Crow's encampment by himself. All he had was nothing more than a smoothbore musket. So we're talking about a rifle that's probably like 60 years outdated. And he had a buffalo hide shield, which was kind of interesting technology. Yes, it's a piece of skin stretched over a round frame, but it was very, very thick. And if you held this thing at the right angle, you could deflect bullets with it.
Cool.
It was kind of cool technology. So Slow, he just rode out. And he went out to the edge of the Crow encampment and basically said, hey guys, I'm challenging myself to your chief in a duel, life or death. If I survive, then I get to take all these horses with me and you guys are screwed. If your chief wins, then you get to kill us all and take your horses back and make a statement.
Okay.
Needless to say, the Crow chief was willing to oblige. He knew nothing about Slow. He didn't look all that, intimidating. Slow came out there. He presented himself almost nonchalant. I want to say he was overconfident, but he was like, hey, you know what? I just rode out to your lines. You haven't killed me yet, so let's go this way. And the idea of a trial by combat thing was really a big thing with the Native Americans. And we kind of attribute it to the European side, but when you watch Game of Thrones between Jon Snow and Ramsay and the Battle of the Bastards, and we talk about
the
how
Mountain and the Viper, but
we look at all that stuff. A lot of those things or traditions came from basically battling the Native Americans and Native Americans battling Native Americans. So yeah, the Crow chief obliged, right? Totally on board with it. Let's do this. So he rode out with his horse.
Okay.
Slow's approach was this. He knew that the Crow chief was vastly a superior fighter. He also knew that since he was a vastly superior fighter, if he were to draw this fight out for too long, he would end up losing. And so what he did is he waited for the Crow chief to make the first shot, because the Crow chief came out. He had the same thing. He had a smoothbore musket and a shield of his own and a knife. And, he came charging out and he knew that the Crow chief would fire first. Now, when you look at smoothbore muskets, these things are horribly useless at like 25 to 30 yards and beyond. They packed a huge bullet. Like it was like a 68 caliber bullet. So a caliber is measured by thousandths of an inch. And so when you look at a 68 caliber bullet, you're talking about a bullet that's almost 3/4 of an inch in diameter. but they're just horrifically inaccurate. The technology behind the barrels was just designed to just get the bullet out of the freaking gun, let nature run its course. Whereas by the time the Civil War and after the Civil War, rifles were turned into carbines. They had shorter barrels. They had rifling. They were percussion cap. They weren't flintlock. This is the reason why the Civil War cost so many lives, is because it was using state of the art technology in terms of hunting rifles and battle weaponry, but very, very old school military tactics. And so that's kind of what was going on here, but a little bit in reverse. So Slow waited for the Crow Chief to make the first shot, and it's exactly what he did. And he made that first shot probably about 60 to 70 yards out. By the time that bullet reached Slow, it was moving at a fraction of its speed, and you could actually see the bullet flying through the air. Slow held up his shield like at a 45-degree angle, and he caught that bullet right at the right angle, and it deflected off.
Okay.
It deflected off towards the ground. The only problem is, and this is kind of a dumpster fire on Slow's part, the bullet deflected off and headed to the ground, but before hitting the ground, it went sailing through his foot.
Ouch.
And it destroyed it.
Ouch.
68 caliber bullet, moving even at 1,000 feet per second. It turned his foot into ground beef.
Jesus.
So that was kind of a bad choice on Slow's part, but he didn't care. He knew now that he had the advantage. And so he raised his rifle and he stayed put.
Okay.
The Crow Chieftain charged. And he charged, and he charged, and Slow waited, and he waited, and he waited, and he waited until, like, literally the last half second, when there was just a few steps in between Slow and this Crow Chief, and then he leveled his gun, and he fired at point-blank range, and shot this chief in the left of the chest. So we're talking thousands of foot-pounds of energy going into your rib cage and your lungs. That degree of power is on par with like what it would be to get shot with a shotgun at point-blank range in your lungs. It destroys and collapses the entire rib cage. Your lungs, your left lung is gone. You're flying backwards. You're hitting the ground hard. And you probably have about 5 to 10 minutes of just agonizing pain before you die.
Yeesh.
And so yeah, Slow then jumped off his horse. He hobbled over there because he basically only had one foot and he was walking on a nub on the other. He hobbled over, and so he had a choice. Typical Plains tradition, when you're dealing with an aggressive enemy, you're trying to make a statement, you don't kill the person first, you scalp them first, and then let them die.
Okay.
So
that is a point you're making.
Yeah, like you're and this happened to a lot of American soldiers where they had like leg wounds and whatnot, but then yeah, the Lakota would come in and scalp them. And there was actually a couple of survivors from this era where they lived for a couple of decades, but they had no scalp. It was just an open skull. And what they would have to do is they would take like a leather, like almost like a leather cloth, and they would put like mineral oil or whatever on it, and then they would drape it over your open skull, and then you would put a hat on it. And invariably, you would always die from a bone infection of the skull because the bone's exposed to the air, it's dead, and you're just asking for an infection, and so you're just living the rest of your life fighting off a potential brain infection. I'm not sure how I would handle that, but
let's just say I don't envy those. Yeah, I don't envy those people at all. That's oof.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially you have like yards of hair that it would take forever to scalp you.
I gotta get it cut. Make it easier for the scalpers.
I actually get it cut really short because that makes it really hard.
Okay, done.
You have nothing to grip onto, so go like full Sinead O'Connor.
I was just gonna make that same joke. Beat me to it. I'll go full G.I. Jane.
Yeah. Just go full Sinead O'Connor, so then you can not get away with tearing up a picture of the Pope on Saturday Night Live.
All right. Perfect.
So yeah, Slow. This is kind of the first gesture of understanding and helping and caring, if this makes sense. Slow pulled out his hunting knife, and the first thing he did was plunge that thing into the chief's heart. Like, wow, that's nice. The idea was that yes, he just defeated a chief. He has to scalp him, but he doesn't want the chief to suffer anymore, and because his left lung has been turned into ground meat, there's absolutely nothing that could save his life. So he dispatched the chief as quickly as possible. And what's interesting is that this is kind of a degree of civility that we see when we look at the end of the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
where some key leaders made some very, very specific decisions that prevented a much greater war from breaking out. Like Ulysses S. Grant and how he handled Robert E. Lee in Appomattox Courthouse and all that. The way that went down is one of the most seminal moments in American history and democracy. So it's interesting to see this on the Native American side. So that's exactly what Slow did. He basically killed his chief. He scalped him, and he rode back home.
Okay.
Along with the stolen horses. Oh, and he took the Crow Chief's horse with him.
Right.
Because he's a horse thief.
I mean, I can't blame him.
And so this really set Slow apart. Suddenly people looked at him differently after this. He came back to the camp, and even his critics were like, okay, there might be something about this guy. Yeah, Slow became one of the most celebrated and an absolute legend. Many of the Lakota looked to Slow as a leader, while his methods were kind of undervaluated. At the time, the Lakota quickly saw that Slow was a brilliant in terms of tactic. His approach to fighting was absolute speed. When he would engage in a fight with the U.S., the idea was to confuse the enemy, break them apart quickly, and confuse the leadership. Make it so they can't communicate with each other. Break up the battalions, bring up divide up all the regiments. Just divide them up so they can't talk to each other, and then just engage as close as humanly possible, so that you can knock out their artillery. Because one thing about American tactics is that we're not big fans of killing our own men.
Yeah.
And this is something that we took through World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Americans do not handle well killing women and children. We don't handle that well at all, which I'm kind of grateful for, because what kind of soldier does it take to start shooting women and children? Or shooting our own men at the response of saying, hey, let's use artillery to kill them off, even if they're on top of us, so it'll kill us too. That's something that America doesn't do well. Therefore, we've really established our technology to be able to fire artillery within inches of where it needs to be, 10, 15 miles away. Yeah, I appreciate that, but then that is also something that is exploitable by a foreign force that knows what they're doing, and they know the American ideal. Slow proved himself as a methodical leader and a cool tactician. He even became known as like a visionary, and ultimately he would become known as one of the most famous Native American names out there, Sitting Bull. And Sitting Bull has a long and storied life, even after this conflict with the Crow Chief, even after the conflict with Custer. We're talking about a guy that got to tour all of the American new states. He got to tour Europe. He met the Queen of England. This guy was considered an absolute legend. And so yeah, Sitting Bull would go on to be one of the most seminal figures in the Plains Wars, and this guy was incredibly conservative. He didn't want any handouts from the federal government. He didn't want any concessions. He just wanted people to just leave his tribe the hell alone. He's like, if you want to surround us, fine. If you want to take over all these lands, we don't care. Just leave our people alone. That was his big thing. So he didn't want any involvement with the Americans. He didn't want, he just didn't want any part in it. In his eyes, his people should be left alone to live their lives peacefully. And conversely, he agreed to, like, hey, over this river and over this hill, that there's a bunch of white people that are there living there legally and peacefully. They will live there legally and peacefully. But as soon as they start trying to take over our lands, then it's going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like this guy was trying to wage war on settlers that were moving out west, because that was kind of the problem that led up to the fight between Custer and the Lakota, was that there was gold to be found in the heart of Lakota territory, and people were just rushing out there. Nobody was stopping them. And so it turned into a lot of slaughters and a lot of massacres that would culminate in the Plains War. So for the most part, the American Civil War, right? So we're the whole conflict between Slow and the Crow Chief took place before the Civil War. After that Civil War took place, federal government obviously was dealing with some other stuff other than the quote-unquote Indian problem. And this afforded time for Sitting Bull to collect and absorb many of the tribal nations, the Sioux, including the Hunkpapa, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho tribes. During this 10-15 years prior to the 1870s, there was a lot of collection going on. There was a lot of amassing. This was Sitting Bull being like, we need to nationalize if we're going to take on whatever force wins the Civil War. The North or the South, it doesn't matter. Once that war is over, they're coming for us.
Okay, makes sense.
And so that's exactly what he did. He just amassed this. It was like a 10-15,000, almost, I want to say it was a village, but it was like a city at this point. And it was during this collection that Sitting Bull picked up Crazy Horse. That's another guy for another episode. Crazy Horse was next level. Many believe that it was Crazy Horse that led the attack against the Americans in Custer's Last Stand. Some people argue that Sitting Bull may have been too old, but he could have orchestrated it, because by the time Custer's Last Stand took place, I mean, yeah, he would have been in his mid to late 40s. He was more of a visionary at that time. Yeah, we're talking about a very interesting collection of people. So by the time Custer's Last Stand, Sitting Bull had formed a massive collective of Native Americans amounting to over 10 to 15,000, with over 2,000 highly trained and battle-experienced warriors. So we're talking about 2,000 men that have spent the past 10-15 years fighting on the Plains Seas. And many of these warriors, including Sitting Bull himself, had fought the U.S. in many smaller skirmishes, and Sitting Bull studied how the Federals fight and their strategies. He fought defensively. He wanted to see how they behave offensively. He wanted to see how the federal government would attack, not rather how they would retreat. And so he made note of all that. On June 5th, Sitting Bull was attending the Sundance ceremony. So this was a ceremony that a lot of Native American tribes had. It was kind of like a summer party get-together, like a New Year's Eve type of thing.
Okay.
Where the entire cultures would get together, pay tribute to the gods, to the leaders, how they were going to contribute. This is when the first harvest would come in. The Sundance Festival was kind of a
big deal.
A big deal.
Yeah, big deal.
And this is where Sitting Bull had a very, very famous vision. He said that soldiers were going to be falling into his camp like grasshoppers from the sky. This is literally 20 days before, that the federal government was going to unleash a massive attack on the Lakota. And so he had this vision, and everybody listened to his vision. Everybody believed him. And then at the same time that this ceremony was going down, scouts from the Crow Nation, keep in mind, the Crow Nation were not gone at this time. They were heavily pissed off at the Lakota for, obvious reasons. These scouts were working for the American government. And then these scouts they saw this giant ceremony go down with 10,000 people. And then they reached out and informed Brigadier General George Crook, Brigadier General Alfred Terry, and Colonel John Gibbon, along with a new Lieutenant Colonel, George Armstrong, who is fresh out of his trial for abandoning his post, for seeing his wife. We're talking about some people here that all fought together to pull Custer out. And basically, they were all notified of the Sioux capital and where they sat. These generals and a young Custer got together a few days after this Sundance ceremony. So I think it was June 8th or June 9th. They got together and they looked at the many thousands of men they had under their command. And they created what would become known as a three-prong approach that would ultimately divide the U.S. forces into three separate groups and hopefully become the final solution, which is a term that you hear again in the Nuremberg trials. The idea was that they would create a final solution, wipe out the Lakota once and for all, and that would result in basically Custer's last stand on June 25th, 1876.
All right.
Woo!
Stage is set.
Okay. And so, yeah, the next episode, I'm going to try to write the notes up on that one sooner than later, get that one ready. I'll hopefully record that very, very shortly, get this one out soon. And the next episode, we're going to look at kind of the details, the nitty gritty of what this three-pronged approach looked like, how it ultimately failed, how it kind of resulted in Custer getting screwed. There may be some elements of politics where I kind of think Ulysses S. Grant, who really did not like Custer, he also did not like Crook and Terry and Gibbon. He was not a big fan of these guys.
He didn't like a lot of people.
No, and so I'm kind of curious to see how it was that we don't know about them. We really don't know about obviously we know Custer, but these other generals who all fought valiantly in the Civil War just get pushed to the wayside. And I think this is one of these weird cases where, yes, the victors get the right to history, but there are times where the defeated also get the right to history. Yeah, it's kind of a very interesting way of looking at it. So that is the story of Sitting Bull. This is a very, very brief history of the Lakota Sioux and what was kind of leading up to it. Kind of like the first episode was focusing heavily on Custer and who he was and his background and try to make him a human being instead of some weird fictional delusional psychotic leader. And I kind of wanted to paint a picture around Sitting Bull as this guy that you probably don't want to mess with, and not because he's a fierce warrior, but because he will take the time to outsmart you.
Yeah, I'd imagine having a conversation with him would be like playing chess.
Or just even playing chess with him would be like playing chess.
I wouldn't even dare.
But I would have loved to have met him.
Oh, yeah. He seems like somebody that, just like thinking about what he did later in life, I would definitely just want to have a conversation.
Oh, yeah. No, he met Annie Oakley.
He called Annie Oakley his adopted daughter.
Yes.
Which I love.
Yes. that is true. He also knew like Buffalo Bill, and how he did those Western sideshows.
Yep.
And it's a kind of a crying shame because Sitting Bull ultimately died in his 60s, like on a cold plane by some random American military attack. Yeah, and yeah, he kind of just died a martyr's death in his 60s. It would have been interesting to see what this guy would have seen and participated in if he had lived past, say, like the 1880s and going into the 1900s. I think it would have been, because he would have been around long enough for us to get an audio recording of him, or even a video of him talking.
That would be cool.
And so yeah, that's part 2. Stay tuned for part 3, where the action really picks up, and this is where we get into Custer's last dumpster fire. We've all been waiting for like an hour and a half. What is the basic idea of what you've got coming up?
Okay. You ready? All right. It is a weird like gear shift. So I have to like let's take it 100 years further. So President Hindenburg, he was 89 years old, president of Germany, and he was like, this really, really annoying, pestering guy named Hitler keeps wanting to be chancellor and it's driving me up the wall. I don't like him. I don't agree with him. He has some good points, but otherwise he's just frustrating. So what we're going to do is we're going to give him a position, and we're going to control his choices, and then that'll be the end of it. That was the plan. As we all know, or anybody who's taken 8th grade history, that plan went to poop.
That is an epitome of a dumpster fire, because this is where Hindenburg, who had a really cool blimp named after him.
Yeah, which also caught fire.
Yeah, well, that's a dumpster fire in itself.
Just saying. That's really a nice
humanity.
Yeah, that's good symbolism.
Actually, I think that the original Hindenburg was actually named after a guy by the name of Hindenburg who invented the balloon.
So just multiple Hindenburgs happening.
Yeah, it's a common German name at that time.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it's one of these things where like, oh man, we've got this political guy. He's kind of over the top. He's
annoying. He will not shut up.
Yeah, like, God, he's short and...
He's short. He has this weird mustache I hate.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
He's weird looking. He needs to stop. He looks like a pig.
Yeah. It like, we tried to get him killed in World War I with a gas attack, and that didn't work. And
that didn't work. I'm hoping that won't bite us in the butt, but...
Yeah, and so basically, this is a classic case of where... we got a guy, we've got a problem, we are going to engineer this problem, we are going to make this thing foolproof, and then World War II.
Yes, it was like, okay, we can control this, we can handle this.
We got this.
And then they lose it. And then World War II happens.
Yeah, like, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, so what? He becomes chancellor, then what is he going to do? We can just vote him out.
It's fine. No, it's not fine. No, he goes and invades
Poland and
the Czech Republic, and then he goes to Poland and invades there, and then
don't forget Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, that was before, and then Poland, and then just everybody was upset.
Yeah, then France,
and then he goes and invades France, and he had the bright idea to go and invade Russia. So now he's fighting on 2 fronts, and then after that, U.S. gets involved, and then Britain. It's a whole thing.
And it's a
whole thing. It's an issue.
And this is all because all Hitler wanted to do was go to France and go to art school.
Yeah.
And they said he sucked, and they kicked him out, and now 10 million people are dead.
Yeah. I mean, what can you do?
It's clearly all France's fault.
Vienna, but close.
Right? If they didn't kick him out of art school, we wouldn't have had all these problems.
I mean, you just make the right guy mad, and it all goes kablooey.
Hey, you're the one who's teaching a bunch of students. Like, you give that one failing grade to the wrong student, and he could turn out to be the 45th president.
Yikes! All right. On that note, I will not. Jokes aside, I will not undermine the seriousness of that topic. But I thought it was super interesting. I'm excited to do it. So that's what I got going on.
Yeah, no, that's gonna be really cool. I know some stuff about that, not a whole heck of a lot, and so I'm really curious to see what you kind of pull out of that whole ordeal, because it's true. It's something at the very superficial level. It's kind of comical on our part,
Yes.
but then it really did result in a Holocaust, 10 million people dying.
Yeah, like the seriousness of this issue is, and it was probably out of Hindenburg's hands. I think he had the best intentions, and then it just went to hell.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting, and it kind of, they had a plan, and then the plan blew up. So that's what we got.
Yeah, I got the beer hall push, and then Crystal mocked, and
oh God,
then
stop.
Yeah, we go from there.
Oh Lord, all the things.
All right, cool.
All right.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent.
Let's throw this one in the can. I'll get this out as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you all keep it a hot mess, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening.
Oh, that's a big yawn.
Uh-huh.
How